Reddit, what is the best thing that has ever happened to you because of curiosity? My first plane ride. My sister and I were walking by the little municipal airport near my grandma's house, and a hippie looking guy saw us looking at the planes and offered to take us up for a ride in his plane. Of course, this all could have gone horribly wrong, but it didn't. He had a little crop dusterish plane, and we went up for about 20 minutes, flying over our little town, the river, etc. It was awesome. Then we landed, and my sister and I went back to grandma's house, and not one person believed us. Probably a good thing. Nowadays, a full-on investigation would be started against this guy. He would lose his pilot license on allegations of kidnapping, and Chris Hansen would be knocking at his door. On a side note, though, I do love crop dusting at the grocery store. When I was 15, back in the good old days when you still could tour the cockpit in an aircraft, I was flying back to Ottawa from Calgary with a stop in Toronto. I decided to ask for a tour of the cockpit, and as I was always interested in planes and flying, got talking to the pilot and co-pilot for a long time. As we approached Toronto, I said I should head back to my seat as we would be landing soon. The pilot then suggested that I use the jump seat behind them in the cockpit and stay for the landing. He hooked me up with a headset so I could hear the air traffic control chatter and gave me a short rundown of how to land an aircraft along with a full rundown of what color of each light on the tarmac means. Needless to say, it was the best flight ever. TLDR. Sat in the cockpit of an aircraft when landing in Toronto. I was on a motorcycle ride back from my parents' house, Pennsylvania, to my house, Texas. I was passing through Kentucky and I saw this neat little road off the highway, so I took it. About 5 minutes of riding when it turns into some dense woods. I think that it might be wise to turn around, but decide to explore a few more miles. I turned down another road and next thing I know, the entire road opened up to this beautiful grassland as far as I could see. I parked my bike and just stood there staring at it all. I was going through some hard times back then, and seeing this beautiful piece of land, just sitting there with grass swaying in the wind, completely quiet but for the sound of nature, really made me realize that what I was going through just didn't matter. Here was the earth. Here was this rock that we sit on that floats through space. Here it is not giving a frick what I was going through. That little patch of earth that I discovered changed me that day. It happened to my friend's brother. He was camping or hiking with a bunch of Boy Scouts. They came across a fence while exploring and hopped it and started to continue their adventure. A few minutes later they were ambushed by serious dudes with loaded guns. The Scouts had unknowingly broke into Camp David. After a long time of questioning and verifying that they were just lost Scouts, their troop was given a tour of the site. Good thing he joined Boy Scouts instead of Muslim youth hikers. I was on a first date with a woman who volunteered at a large zoo. We met through friends and at the time I lived 2 hours away from her, so I agreed to travel to her if she had a good idea for a first date. She decided a day at the zoo would be great, and was able to take me behind the scenes of everything. I asked, so how much do you feed the polar bears, out of random curiosity? She told me the answer and then threw in they also get marshmallows if they are good. I was surprised about this fact, because I've never heard of it. So she took me behind the polar bear habitat with one of the zookeepers. It had just happened to be near feeding time. The zookeeper got a big bucket of fish and fed it to the bears. The only thing separating my date and I from the polar bears were 5 heavy vertical bars. After the fish were gone, the zookeeper took a bag of marshmallows from his pockets and tapped the bars with a large metal pole. I assume this meant marshmallow time because a polar bear looked up like holy crap it's marshmallow time and ran over to the bars. He stuck a marshmallow on the pole, about 4 or 5 feet long, got it soaked in some delicious fish juices from the bucket, and fed it to him. Then he let me do it. This was the closest I've ever been to any kind of bear, and let me tell you, polar bears are freaking huge. I got him to stand up for the marshmallow. Seeing him so close was just amazing. Best first date I've ever been on. I promptly married that girl. TLDR. My curiosity taught me firsthand that the only thing polar bears love more than fish are marshmallows. I live right beside the railroad tracks. One hot summer day I got bored and wondered where they went. So I climbed up this steep grade and started walking along the tracks, just relaxing and letting my mind wander. Of course I was watching for trains. About 20 minutes later I hear something. I walk over to the edge of the tracks and see about a 50-foot nearly vertical drop off. At the bottom is the most beautiful creek. It was like something out of a movie, it was so picture perfect. So I slid down the hill, took off my shoes and started walking in the water. Well, the creek ran under the tracks, so when they built the railroad they put in a tunnel. I look through the long tunnel and on the other side is a pond. So I swim through the tunnel and on the other side I find myself swimming in this deep pond. But I noticed something. This pond wasn't natural. Someone had built a dam in the creek to slow the flow of water and make this paradise. The shovel was still there from where they made it. They had even built a bench and a rope swing over the pond. It was the most amazing experience. I couldn't help but wonder about what had brought these people to build this place. I kept going back to this place throughout the summer and eventually followed the creek to a housing development where I stopped and turned back. I only shared this pond with a few people over the years. I consider it my little paradise and I go there whenever I feel the world getting to me. It reminds me there is a simpler part to life and quite a bit of mystery in it too. Stories like this on Reddit have engendered a Pavlovian response in me. I kept waiting for the horrific turn of the story or evil-natured troll that would send my day into a tailspin. By the penultimate sentence I was wincing, clenching my abs and squeezing the mouse in anticipation of traumatic reading. Everything turned out great. Thanks for keeping it real. I was on duty in the military, and I heard a noise behind a tent at about 3 o'clock in the morning. I was curious, so I went to go see what it was. There was a guy on top of a big tent, with a noose around his neck, trying to hang himself. I managed to get him down before jumped. No one was injured. Good save, man. 3 years ago, Lollapalooza. I was too poor to buy tickets, so I figure I'll go to Chicago that day and just wander around the fence and hear music. I was too much of a bitch back then to try sneaking in on purpose. At one point I saw a break in the fence and was curious where it would take me. I walk for about 5 minutes and I start seeing people running back and forth. I was so confused. A security guard grabs me by the arm and says, "Hey, you're not allowed to be back here," and he walked me out into Lollapalooza. TLDR. Accidentally got backstage at Lollapalooza. Got to stay the day for free. It's like the art of haggling. Overshoot so you end up where you want to be. I wondered what would happen if I set the jumpers on my motherboard for a Pentium 120 MHz when I only had Pentium 90 MHz in the socket. I independently discovered overclocking, and my Quake 2 frame rates went up almost linearly. My friend and I wondered what would happen if we set his Pentium 3 450 MHz to about 600 MHz. It was then I discovered you could cool a computer with water, like a car engine. That setup was sick, and all homebrewed. He even drilled the water block himself. My brother's story. We were at Dragoncan and he was wandering around the convention area at 2 in the morning. He and a few of our friends noticed a guy carrying a pizza. Turns out, the guy was John DiMaggio, voice of Bender and Jake, Adventure Time. They ended up talking to him for a while and he did double rainbow as Jake for them. He also gave them the pizza. I read that as Joe DiMaggio at first, and was subsequently very confused. That's an awesome story about the penguins. And let me tell you, you're lucky it went that way. When I had an internship at a zoo, I quickly realized that if you're wearing a keeper uniform and holding any kind of box, bag, etc., at least 5 people will ask you if you're going to feed something. Most of the time we were just going to clean or fix something in their enclosure. This one woman asked a keeper and me if we were getting ready to feed the tigers. When we told her no, she got sad and said she was hoping if we were that we'd let her help. My keeper gave a light chuckle and explained to her that we have to feed the tigers through metal chutes to avoid contact with the tigers. She then went on to tell us we were idiots because she's seen shows on Animal Planet and knows you can play and wrestle with tigers and they don't hurt you any. I once bumped into a colleague who was retiring from a job I would have killed for. I casually asked who was replacing him. He asked me if I wanted the job. 3 weeks later his boss phoned me and set up an interview. That was almost 3 years ago. I love my job. I was at a Pearl Jam concert at Madison Square Garden, and after the show, my boyfriend and I were walking around the stadium. We saw this open door on the ground level, and because we took so long to walk around, the place was practically devoid of guards. We walked into the door, went down some stairs, through another open door, and we realized we were backstage. We thought this place was empty, but then we saw huge speaker boxes labeled with Pearl Jam stickers and stuff. We walked around the boxes some more and thought there was nothing else interesting to see, so as we made our way toward the same door, I hear a hey. I turn around and we come face to face with Eddie freaking Vedder. We all talked for about 20 minutes, and he is a really good guy. He gave us a free subscription for the Pearl Jam 10 Club for 2 years before we left. I occasionally played Tribes with a guy who was new into being an editor at a smallish tech blog back in 2005. I was in college looking for something to do and asked if he needed an intern. Spent a few years as a staff writer at the blog, Gizmodo, which led me into my career as a journalist. Currently work as an editor and reporter at a major metro newspaper. So, curiosity made my career. I was about 14-15 at the time, can't remember exactly. One night, just before going to bed, I decided purely out of the blue that I would get up at 4 o'clock to go watch the stars for a while. This was in late October, just in time for the Orioles. I had no idea. I also managed to catch very slight and weak northern lights, but northern lights nevertheless. This was at a latitude of about 47-48 degrees, so they don't happen very often. It's kinda random, but because of the hobby my wife and I have, we constantly have amazing things happen to us that are awesome. We are arc hounds, so it's in our best interest to be curious. Example 1. In Ida, Arkansas doing digs for quartz crystals. It's the last day we are there Sunday and we should drive back. We stop by a rock shop and we still have the bug to dig after digging for the past 5 days. The lady behind the counter tells us that we can go to their quartz mine but to keep quiet and be careful because no one is up there to supervise, which is against some rules. We get up to the mine after driving this insane dirt road on the side of one of the mountains in the area and see that they had just dug a fresh pit along a huge quartz vein but hadn't cleaned it out yet. Ended up with dozens of the most amazing quartz clusters that we had ever found, including a huge 50-pound cluster. Example 2. Wife is driving around and sees a creek bed that she wants to explore that is about 10 minutes from our house. Parks along the side of the road and starts walking along the bank of the river about half a mile and comes to a hillside that has been washed away. Sees some rocks sticking out of the hill in an unusual manner. Calls me. I grab our gear and get to her location and realize she has found a huge concentration of nodules. These nodules range in size from baseball to 60 pounds. Inside almost every nodule is some sort of fossil fragment or complete fossil that is perfectly preserved. Every time it rains, we go out and collect amazing quality ammonites, museum grade, and other various pieces of material. I could go on, but the point is, being curious is always amazing and I can't possibly say that there is only a single thing that I could classify as the best thing ever. Rather an entire list of amazing various things that have happened in my life that have been a result of being curious. Nodule. Not the best, but a weird story. Randomly struck up a conversation with a dude in a sandwich place. He asked me for $5. I gave him $1. He then returned my money because he said he was testing me and gave me two $30 gift certificates to Staples and a little baggie of weed. He said if I actually gave him $5 it meant I was a B, but if I gave him nothing it meant I was cold-hearted or something. The guy was pretty insane. I guess n equals 0.00547. I was running back to my apartment through the pouring rain and spotted some trash a few meters out of my way in the grass. I changed course to go pick it up to throw it away. It turns out it wasn't trash. It was $5.20 bills folded up just sitting there. That was money for a drug drop. The dealers now want to find you and kill you. Send me those 520s and I'll make them go away. Prince Mustafa of Libya. I heard some faint music outside my house, so my buddy and I followed it for blocks. Turns out, it was a fair. We rode the Ferris wheel. The worst was when I pushed a mysterious button in a hallway as a kid. Turned out to be a live light socket. I heard some faint music outside my house, so my buddy and I followed it for blocks. Turns out, it was a fair. We rode the Ferris wheel. You should read something wicked this way comes. There was a box that sat near the dumpster out behind where I live. It was there for years before I decided to open it. Inside was $27 in quarters. That was a great day. You robbed some homeless person of their life savings. I met the love of my life. Typically I am not very forthright with women, but my curiosity got the better of me about something she had done at work. We worked together at the time, which I normally would not have questioned, and the conversation led to the most intense and satisfying romantic experience of my life. Here's to it being the last one as well. I got an email account my freshman year in college and was curious about how the funky computer I was logging into worked, so I started reading the docs by running a command called man. About 15 years later, I look back and realize this led directly to a successful career in software engineering and all the wealth I could have reasonably wanted. Way to man up. Well, I'm not sure if this will work out for me in the end, but getting into law school, my girlfriend was studying for the LSATs, and partially out of boredom but also to see what it was like, I decided to take a practice one alongside her. I ended up doing really well on everything but the logic games, which are usually the ones most people actually have to study and learn for the test. I hadn't considered law school until that point, but I was kind of wavering on what to do after undergrad, and it really got me thinking about it. A couple years later and here I am. I stumbled right into a world record setting zombie congregation in Fremont, WA while on a trip to Seattle. Best afternoon spent. This is partially curiosity and partially reading the little pamphlets that they give to tourists when you tour buildings in Washington, D.C. I'm a violinist, and so when I was reading the Library of Congress pamphlet and noticed that they have some of the best and rarest violins, violas and cellos in the world, I had to figure out a way to get in and see them. I was with my mom, who followed me around for about 30 minutes as I tried to figure out which room they were in and finally started asking the workers where they were. I asked one person, who asked another person, who asked another person who had the key to the room. I of course had to explain to all these people that I play violin so they would let me in. I finally found someone who had the keys, and they let me into a small room where there were a few violins, violas and cellos in humidified glass cases on the walls. Sadly, I didn't get to touch any of them, but I got to see some of the rarest and most expensive Amatis, Guarneris and Stradivarius in the world. It was awesome. I once picked up an empty squished cigarette package that was lying on a sidewalk. I don't smoke. There was $80 tucked inside. When I was a little kid, my brother and I were at the pizza parlor playing video games when the vendor came to collect the quarters. When we went over to watch what he was doing, he spilled his bucket of coins all over the place. We helped him pick up the quarters and afterwards he put like 50 credits on Metal Slug in the Simpsons game. We went apeshit for hours. Oh, and he opened up the Candy Claw game and let us grab handfuls of candy. I got to hang out with Parappa the Rapper. I heard about a game release party by Sony in NYC. I took a bus, train and walked down to the Bowery only to realize the press release failed to point out it was invitation only. I walked around back, picked up a box and helped people move instruments inside. I then hid backstage and watched the show. It turns out it was the Parappa the Rapper release party and I spent the next 2 hours hanging out with Chop Chop Onion, Parappa and Sunny Funny. I had brought my PSX with me, so they all signed it and I was given a huge bag of promos by them. Best day ever. My mother got in touch with her old roommate and best friend from university after a long time without contact. Turned out she lived 1,300 miles away now, but they started talking anyway. Later, their daughter saw us in pictures of our old family trip to Japan and wanted to know more about it. My mother didn't think we'd care, but asked us if we wanted to talk to her. Long story short, ended up moving 1,300 miles away to another country for the last 3 years, moving in with their family for 6 months. The very first time I met their daughter in real life involved me sleeping in the room next to hers for 5 months. Now we're engaged, and I can't imagine any stronger love than this. All because I decided, what the frick? Out of curiosity I'll send an email to a girl who I knew I would never meet in person. After my senior year of high school, I wasn't too enthusiastic about any of the art degree oriented colleges I had seen, so I googled study abroad, came upon the website of a small atelier, private art school, based in Paris. Class size was about 10 students to 2 teachers, and consisted of drawing from a live model for 8 hours a day as well as drawing in the Louvre during the evenings. This piqued my interest, so I sent the head guy an email expressing my passion for art and my respect for their school and their more traditional ways of teaching. He replied in an off-putting manner, and I thought that was the end of it. A couple months later he emailed me and told me he had seen my work on Facebook and that he thought he had made a mistake by refusing me. He encouraged me to apply. I did and was subsequently accepted. However, tuition alone being 3,000 plus euros, not counting transportation and the rental of an apartment in Paris, plus the cost of living for 3 months, the duration of the course, I reluctantly told him I couldn't accept the offer. His response: paid for the plane tickets both ways and frequent flyer miles, helped hook me up with a free place to stay the entire 3 months. I only had to pay the tuition and the cost of food, other crap. I'm halfway through this program now. I'll be attending another one in the countryside in summer, with a scholarship. This experience is changing my life. LOL at I'm in Paris. Cooped up on Reddit. If anyone reading this is in Paris, we should chill. I read your story. Now link your freaking art, Jesus. This will probably be buried due to the 1,000 plus comments, but I still feel like sharing it. It's not my story, but my dad's. He served in the army doing military intelligence in the early 1980s. Him and his men were stationed at the corner of West Germany to patrol the borders between East Germany and Czechoslovakia. He told me stories about how other groups had been assassinated in the night by the Baader-Meinhof group, and that was his biggest fear. Anyways, one night on their way back, my dad was playing techno for his men. My dad was a pretty cool guy, so they were all chatting and my dad suggested they take a different route. Out of curiosity, they came across this abandoned Jeep that had a bunch of bullet holes in the side. He said it looked so eerie with the moonlight reflecting, and it was in this clearing on a hill. They assumed it could be a trap, so they took their precautions so they wouldn't get killed. Once they deemed it was safe, my dad approached the Jeep from the driver's side and saw a man covered in blood, gripped the steering wheel. He was shaking with fear and he looked close to death. My dad, speaking German, talked the man out of the vehicle and into theirs. They brought this unknown man back to the base and to the medical building. The man lived, but my dad never found out his name or why he was there or what happened to him. Either that, or he just never told me out of confidentiality. He does know that if the man was left out there for even another hour, he would have died. My dad got a medal because the man was someone important. I think he told me why when I was little, but I can't remember, and he doesn't really tell that story unless I ask him to. Either way, I think it's pretty cool. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.